How to spot a gaslighter. 7 signs you should never ignore. Have you ever walked away from a conversation wondering, wait, did I actually remember that correctly? Maybe you clearly remember what someone said, but when you bring it up, they insist it never happened. Maybe you express that something hurt you, and instead of addressing what happened, they make you feel like you are the problem. Or maybe, over time, you have started questioning your own memory, your judgment, and even your ability to trust yourself. If that sounds familiar, there may be something important you need to understand. Sometimes confusion is not a sign that you are bad at communicating. Sometimes the problem is that the conversation itself is being manipulated. Today, we are talking about gaslighting. But this is not a video about labeling everyone who disagrees with you as a gaslighter. It is not about turning ordinary relationship conflicts into something more dramatic than they are. And it is certainly not about encouraging you to become suspicious of everyone around you. Instead, we are going to look at 7 practical signs that can help you recognize unhealthy patterns of psychological manipulation, understand what is actually happening, and respond with wisdom. Because healthy relationships can survive honest conversations. Healthy relationships can handle correction. Healthy relationships can admit mistakes. And healthy relationships do not require you to abandon reality just to keep the peace. So stay with me until the end, because the final sign may be one of the most important. And if you find this kind of biblical and practical wisdom helpful, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced a situation where someone made you question something you knew had happened? You do not have to share private details. Just share what you learned from the experience. Let's begin. 1. They consistently deny things that clearly happened. One of the clearest patterns associated with gaslighting is persistent denial. Imagine you have a conversation with someone. They say something hurtful. You remember it. Later, you calmly bring it up. Instead of saying, I don't remember it that way, but let's talk about it, they immediately respond, that never happened. You're imagining things. You completely misunderstood. I never said that. Now, one disagreement about what happened does not automatically mean someone is gaslighting you. Human memory is imperfect. 2 people can experience the same conversation differently. Sometimes people genuinely remember events differently. That's why discernment requires us to look for patterns rather than jumping to conclusions based on one incident. The concern becomes greater when denial happens repeatedly and is used to shut down every attempt at honest communication. You remember something happening. They deny it. You provide context. They still deny it. You explain how their behavior affected you. They shift the conversation toward your supposed instability. And eventually, you stop trusting your own memory. That's when you need to pay attention. The goal of healthy communication is not necessarily for 2 people to remember every detail identically. The goal is to create enough honesty and humility that both people can discuss what happened. A healthy person can say, I remember it differently. I don't think that was my intention. I may have handled that poorly. Help me understand what you experienced. Those statements create room for dialogue. Manipulation closes the door. And there is an important biblical principle here. James 1 verse 19 encourages believers to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That principle requires humility. If someone cannot tolerate the possibility that they may have been wrong, communication becomes extremely difficult. So don't focus on one disagreement. Look at the pattern. Does this person regularly deny reality whenever accountability enters the conversation? If so, don't ignore what you are observing. 2. They turn your feelings into evidence against you. Here's another important sign. You tell someone that their behavior hurt you. Instead of discussing the behavior, they attack the fact that you were hurt. You say, that comment really hurt me. And they respond, you're too sensitive. You always overreact. You're impossible to please. Everything bothers you. Notice what happened. The original issue disappeared. Now the conversation is about whether you are allowed to have feelings. This can be extremely confusing because your emotions become treated as evidence that your perspective is invalid. But feeling something does not automatically make every interpretation correct. At the same time, having an emotion does not make you irrational. Both things can be true. You can misunderstand someone's intention and still genuinely feel hurt. Healthy communication allows room for that complexity. Someone might say, "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I can see why that affected you." That is maturity. A manipulative response might instead make your emotional reaction the entire subject of the conversation. And after enough of these interactions, you may start suppressing your feelings because you are afraid of being called dramatic. You stop speaking up. You stop asking questions. You stop explaining what bothers you. Eventually, you become silent just to avoid conflict. That is worth noticing, because peace is not always the same thing as silence. Sometimes silence means wisdom, but sometimes silence means you have become afraid to express yourself. Proverbs 15 verse 1 teaches that a gentle answer can turn away wrath. Notice what that requires. It requires communication. It requires restraint. It requires two people willing to engage without destroying each other. So if every concern you raise gets turned into an attack on your personality, pay attention to the pattern. 3. They make you defend yourself instead of addressing the issue. This is one of the most subtle signs. You begin a conversation about something they did. 5 minutes later, you are defending yourself. 10 minutes later, you're explaining your childhood. 15 minutes later, you're apologizing for your tone. And somehow, the original issue has completely disappeared. Let's say you ask, "Why did you speak to me that way?" Instead of answering, they respond, "Well, you have done worse things." Then you explain. They bring up something from 3 months ago. You address that. They bring up something from 5 years ago. Eventually, you are so busy defending yourself that nobody is discussing the original behavior. This technique can create enormous confusion. You start thinking, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up. Maybe I need to apologize. And sometimes an apology may genuinely be appropriate. But there is a difference between healthy accountability and endless deflection. Healthy accountability says, "Yes, I did that wrong, but there is something else we should discuss too." Unhealthy deflection says, "You cannot question me because you have made mistakes." Everyone makes mistakes. Christianity does not teach us that one person's wrongdoing cancels another person's responsibility. Galatians 6 verse 5 teaches that each person should carry their own load. That means we can take responsibility for our own actions without using someone else's mistakes as an excuse to avoid ours. So the next time a difficult conversation suddenly becomes a courtroom where you are forced to defend your entire character, pause. Ask yourself, are we actually discussing the issue I brought up? That simple question can restore clarity. 4. They rewrite the conversation afterward. Sometimes the most confusing part doesn't happen during the conversation. It happens afterward. You walk away remembering exactly what was said. Then later the story changes. Suddenly they claim, "That isn't what I said. You were the one who started yelling. I was only responding to you. You made me say that. You misunderstood everything." Again, people can remember conversations differently. That's normal. But repeated rewriting can become a serious problem when it consistently removes their responsibility and places all responsibility on you. One practical thing you can do is slow down. Don't immediately argue about every detail. Don't feel pressured to prove your entire memory in one conversation. Instead, focus on the specific behavior and its impact. You can say, "This is what I remember happening. This is how I understood what was said. This is what I am asking you to address." And if the conversation continues becoming more confusing, give yourself permission to step away. You don't have to solve every disagreement immediately. Sometimes clarity comes when emotions settle. And if a situation involves important decisions, agreements, finances, work responsibilities, or other practical matters, keeping accurate records can help prevent confusion. That is not about secretly building a case against everyone. It is about maintaining clarity. Wisdom is not paranoia. Wisdom is paying attention. 5. They use your vulnerabilities against you. This sign is especially important in close relationships. You trust someone with something personal. You tell them about an insecurity. You share something you are struggling with. You tell them about a past experience. You reveal something that makes you feel vulnerable. And later, during an argument, they use that information to attack you. Suddenly, something you shared privately becomes ammunition. They know what makes you insecure. They know what scares you. They know what makes you doubt yourself. And instead of protecting that vulnerability, they use it to gain control. That is not healthy intimacy. Real intimacy creates safety. It does not require perfection, but it creates a reasonable expectation that personal information will not constantly be weaponized. Proverbs 11 verse 13 speaks about the importance of keeping confidence. That principle matters in friendships, marriages, families, churches, and professional relationships. This is also why wisdom in relationships involves boundaries. You do not have to tell everyone everything about yourself. Trust should develop over time. And if someone repeatedly uses your vulnerabilities against you, you are allowed to reconsider how much access that person should have to your private life. Forgiveness does not require unlimited access. Grace does not eliminate boundaries. And being a Christian does not mean you must remain in every unhealthy interaction simply because you want to be loving. Jesus himself demonstrated that wisdom sometimes involves stepping away from hostile environments. 6. You start doubting yourself more and more. This may be the most important sign to watch. Not because self-doubt automatically proves someone is gaslighting you, but because persistent manipulation can gradually change the way you see yourself. First, you may think, "That was strange." Then, "Maybe I misunderstood." Later, "Maybe I'm just too sensitive." Eventually, "Maybe I can't trust my own judgment." And this is where the situation becomes serious. You begin asking other people to confirm things you already know. You become afraid to make simple decisions. You replay conversations repeatedly. You wonder whether you are remembering things correctly. You apologize constantly. You become anxious before expressing a reasonable concern. You start thinking, "Maybe I am the problem." Again, self-reflection is good. Christians should examine their hearts. We should be willing to receive correction. Proverbs teaches the value of wisdom and correction. But there is a difference between humility and the complete destruction of healthy self-trust. Humility says, "I could be wrong, so I am willing to listen." Manipulation says, "You must be wrong because I refuse to accept responsibility." Those are very different things. A healthy relationship should not require you to become incapable of trusting your own observations. So if you notice that you have become significantly more confused, fearful, or self-doubting after repeated interactions with a particular person, don't automatically blame yourself. Pause, reflect, talk to a trustworthy and mature person, and if necessary, seek professional support. Sometimes an outside perspective can help you separate facts from assumptions and identify patterns you could not see clearly while inside the situation. 7. They rarely take genuine responsibility. The final sign brings many of the others together. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody says things they wish they could take back. Everybody gets defensive sometimes. So the question is not, has this person ever behaved badly? The better question is, what happens when they are confronted with their behavior? Do they eventually calm down and reflect? Can they acknowledge their part? Can they apologize without immediately adding 10 excuses? Can they make meaningful changes? Can they hear correction without turning the entire conversation into an attack? That matters. A genuine apology usually includes responsibility. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. I understand why that hurt you. I will work on changing it." It doesn't have to be perfectly worded. People are imperfect. But over time, genuine repentance tends to produce some evidence of change. On the other hand, a person who repeatedly refuses responsibility may keep producing the same conflict. They hurt you. They deny it. They blame you. They become angry that you brought it up. They apologize only when necessary to regain control. Then the cycle begins again. That's when you should stop focusing only on individual conversations and start looking at the overall pattern. Because patterns tell you more than promises. So what should you do if you think someone is gaslighting you? First, don't panic. You don't need to confront someone aggressively just because you recognize one or two of these behaviors. Gaslighting is a specific pattern, not a label to throw at everyone who disagrees with you. Second, slow down. When conversations become confusing, give yourself time to process what happened. Third, separate facts from interpretations. Ask, what actually happened? What did I assume happened? What did the person actually say? What am I feeling? What evidence do I have? This kind of thinking can help restore clarity. Fourth, seek wise perspective. Talk to someone mature, trustworthy, and balanced. Not someone who automatically tells you that everyone in your life is toxic. You need someone who can help you examine the situation honestly. Someone who will tell you when you are wrong and support you when you are being treated unfairly. Fifth, establish boundaries. You can say, I am willing to have this conversation, but I am not willing to be insulted. I want to discuss what happened, but I am not going to argue about my character. We can continue this conversation when we are both calm. Those are not acts of hatred. They are acts of clarity. And finally, remember this, you do not have to prove your worth to someone who refuses to treat you with respect. A biblical perspective on discernment. As Christians, we need to be especially careful with this subject. It is easy to take a psychological concept and turn it into a spiritual weapon. We should not do that. Not everyone who disagrees with you is a gaslighter. Not everyone who forgets something is manipulating you. Not every defensive response is calculated abuse. Not every difficult relationship is evidence that Satan is attacking you through another person. Sometimes people are simply immature. Sometimes people misunderstand each other. Sometimes both people are contributing to the conflict. And sometimes we are the ones who need correction. That's why discernment requires humility. Jesus taught his followers to examine themselves carefully. Before we focus on someone else's faults, we should be willing to examine our own hearts. But humility does not mean ignoring unhealthy behavior. Love does not mean pretending harmful behavior is acceptable. Forgiveness does not mean removing every boundary. And being compassionate does not mean surrendering your ability to recognize reality. You can be loving and discerning at the same time. You can forgive someone and still create distance. You can pray for someone and still say no. You can believe that God can change someone without volunteering yourself to be repeatedly harmed by their behavior. That is wisdom. Final thought. If you have ever found yourself thinking, maybe I'm imagining everything. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I should just stay quiet. I want you to pause before automatically believing those thoughts. Ask yourself what the pattern actually shows. Are disagreements handled with honesty? Are mistakes acknowledged? Are apologies followed by change? Can you express concerns without being attacked? Can you disagree without being punished? Can both people take responsibility? These questions can reveal more than any label ever could. And remember, your goal should not be to win an argument. Your goal should be truth. Because truth does not need manipulation to survive. Truth can handle examination. Truth can handle questions. Truth can handle correction. And according to Jesus in John 8 verse 32, the truth brings freedom. So seek truth. Seek wisdom. Seek counsel. Examine your own heart. Set healthy boundaries. And most importantly, ask God for discernment. If this video helped you understand gaslighting more clearly, subscribe to the channel for more biblical wisdom about relationships, discernment, emotional health, and Christian living. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What is one lesson you have learned about recognizing unhealthy communication? You don't need to mention names or share anything private. Just share the lesson. Your comment might help someone else recognize something they have been struggling to understand. And if you know someone who could benefit from this message, consider sharing the video with them. Until next time, keep seeking truth, keep growing in wisdom, and keep your heart anchored in Christ. God bless you.